So welcome to everyone and thanks for joining us. This evening I am going to do my second webinar of the year. This is our free monthly series, the first Wednesday of every night, which is going well and we've had a lot of interest. When I sent out the email to you an hour ago, I saw a lot of new faces, which was really nice. So I want to just start with a lineup for this evening. And we're going to look at both sides of the equation. And that's something I do for pretty much anything. I find that we tend to live in a bit of a binary society nowadays. Something's either good or it's bad. But everything has a flip side, including exercise. So we're going to start with the benefits of regular exercise and acknowledge that. That's really important. We'll go through some different phases of what the general consumer is doing in the space of exercise. And then we're going to talk about specifically exercise and cardiovascular health, what I call the other side of the story or the other side of the coin. And then we'll start to contextualize the negative stuff that I'm going to bring in within the particular athletes that we are working with. And just a little warning here, I'm going to ask for some audience participation. And we're going to start, and before we finish, we'll allow time for questions. So I want to just ask you some questions to get started. So find the little chat box and answer me 3 questions. Where are you in the world? We tend to get people from various places, so I love reading that. What is your profession? What's your professional background? What kind of people do you look after? Might just be yourself. And what would you like to achieve or obtain from attending this webinar? And that helps me as well to direct my focus. Okay, so we've got, yeah, keep them flying in, guys. We've got UK and Miami, Florida so far. We've got Argentina stroke US, golf professional, clinical dietitian, performance nutritionist, Philadelphia. Oh, I know who that is. Asheville, North Carolina, near where I studied. Scotland, welcome. Liverpool, Wisconsin, Windsor, Ireland, London. Okay, brilliant. So I'm in Scotland. I recently emigrated back from South Africa. Obviously, from my accent, I am Scottish, but I haven't actually lived in Scotland since I was 22. And you can tell by the gray hair, that was a while ago. I was down south, I was in the US, I was in Australia, and the last 12 years has been in South Africa. Now back in the UK, where this Centre for Integrative Sports Nutrition is based. Okay. So guys, thanks Don. Done lots on cardiovascular health. I'd like to link the two together. Yeah, keep the chats coming through. Tell me what you want to learn tonight. Okay, let's get going with this. Firstly, benefits of regular aerobic exercise. So let's start with ACSM. That's as good as any. The American College of Sports Medicine. When I studied in the UK and the US, very much what ACSM said was kind of gospel. So, and it's still very respected in terms of information that comes out for health and fitness. So let's start with seeing what they say. The scientific evidence demonstrating the beneficial effect of exercise is indisputable, and the benefits of exercise outweigh the risks in most adults. A friend of mine, Pete Williams, has talked about exercise from the perspective of much more than just marginal gains. So that was a Team Sky kind of thing. Marginal gains, what small changes can you make for overall performance? In a health setting, there's nothing about marginal gains for exercise because it's just fundamentally vital, important. We can't do without it if we want our health. And I attended a functional medicine conference in Johannesburg a number of years ago, and it was on gastrointestinal health presented by an ex-surgeon, gastrointestinal surgeon. He basically did stomach bypass surgery for his profession and then realized, hey, I want to get on the preventative end of this. And he started his presentation by saying this, which has stuck with me to this day. There's only two reasons that a person should be sedentary in years gone past. We're not talking about this modern society, we're talking about old societies. Two reasons you might be sedentary. One is illness and one is injury. Both of them have an inflammatory component. So basically, if you're sedentary, you are pro-inflammatory because the body kind of sees it as, hey, you're ill or you're injured because you're not moving. Okay, so that's a sort of fundamental. We need to acknowledge how important exercise is for us. And here's going back even further in time. In order to remain healthy, the entire day should be devoted exclusively to ways and means of increasing one's strength and staying healthy. And the best way to do so is through physical exercise. And I really like going back in time because I think we can learn a lot. And one of my favorite books, those who see me present more than, occasionally will know this. The Blue Zones is one of my favorite books, and it's a National Geographic study that was that basically found 5 hotspots in the world of healthy centurions, people who hit 100 years of age with healthy mind and healthy body. And there was an island in Greece, an island in Japan, there was a place in Costa Rica, a place in California. I'm trying to remember the 5th one. But basically, they had very, very old-fashioned lifestyles, and they didn't have Olympic training. They certainly didn't have CrossFit classes and things like that to keep them fit. They were just naturally active. So that's a kind of backdrop to what exercise is. Exercise or movement is basically looking after yourself by farming, producing vegetables, moving, helping your neighbors, living. Okay, we're now in this very strange modern environment where you drive to the front door of Virgin Active to go and then walk on a treadmill. So that, as a context, I think is quite important to just realize what is the human body designed to do. And here's a research paper that did a review on the cardiovascular effects of physical activity. And you can see, it's phenomenal. It is that magic pill that we talk about. And I want to add on to that, this is cardiovascular specific, but regular exercise has also been shown to reduce type 2 diabetes, some cancers, the incidence of falls and osteoporotic fractures in elderly, depression, weight management, cognitive function, and also the quality of life, and also reduction of mortality. So really, really important. I'm just checking the chat box. Okay, I'm getting feedback. My slides are not changing. Okay, let me stop, guys, and I will restart my presentation. Okay, tell me if the slides are changing now. Ew. They're still not changing.
It's still the same, Ian. It's still on.
Okay, thanks, Mimi. It's very strange. I've done this plenty of times. Okay, third time lucky. Any changes?
No.
No.
Change.
Okay, what if I stay on?
If you say it, if you
this?
Yeah, stay it like that, we can see it.
Can you see it like that?
Yes.
Okay, right. Let me get rid of presenters notes. Okay, just increase this a little bit. Bit too much. Yeah, that's a bit too much. Okay, sorry about this, guys. Okay, you happy with that, Mimi?
Yeah, we can see it really well, actually.
Okay, all right. So I'll stick in this mode. Right, that's the lineup. Whiz through. Questions, you've done that. And then we've had ACSM. I'll send you the slides tomorrow as well. And we've got Hippocrates. You have wondered who I was talking about there. And then we got to this paper, didn't we? Okay, so next slide is Stephen Blair. So Stephen Blair is an amazing researcher. I've met him twice, once in Scotland, once in North Carolina. And he basically worked for the Cooper Center, Aerobic Center in Dallas. And they basically brought in people every single year and tracked a bunch of different fitness markers over time. So this particular research study was looking at attributable fractions for all-cause deaths. And they'd studied 40,000 men and 13,000 women in this aerobic center longitudinal study. The attributable fractions are adjusted for age in each other item in the figure. So CRF stands for cardiorespiratory fitness. So you can see that contributions to death are much, much more coming just from lack of fitness compared to obesity, smoking, high cholesterol, diabetes. The only one that comes anywhere close is hypertension, but just in men. So, and he's done bunches of other studies. I just picked one. He also looked at the risk of cardiovascular mortality related to BMI. And there's another slide showing low, medium, and high BMI. When the activity levels were low, all BMIs were high risk factors. And when activity levels were higher, it was the opposite. Even overweight people had a much lower incidence of morbidity or mortality. Okay, so that's the backdrop to the benefit of exercise. So now we move on to the marathon boom. And this was basically late 70s into the 80s. So using American statistics, approximately 25,000 participants finished a marathon in the US in 1976, which increased to 143,000 by 1980. And by 1990, that figure had doubled. Now, well, this is still 7 years ago, 500,000 people completed a marathon in America. So we've had a massive surge of popularity of participation events. And it's not just in America, we've seen the London Marathon over years stretch out, but then smaller city marathons increase. In South Africa over the last, decade where I was there, the Ironman was booked out, laterally booked out solidly every single year. I mean, it's a major event, it's a very long swim, a very long cycle, finished by a marathon. I mean, who would want to do that? But it's become very, very popular. And this is the kind of backdrop that I'm going to present from, because they're the kind of clients that I started seeing. In the 80s, this guy became very popular, Jim Fixx, and he wrote this bestseller book, The Complete Book of Running. And his story was he started running age 35 to lose a lot of weight because he wasn't, he'd been unhealthy. But sadly, age 52, while out running, he died of a heart attack. Now, at the time, it was related, autopsy related it to congenital reasons. But we also need to ask, what was his diet like? What was his stress levels like? Just a little clue for other factors that we need to consider. Because in this era in the 1980s, it was all about exercise is good, we need to do more. And that was the belief system that I bought into as a young lad. Okay, this isn't going to work so well because it's animated. Okay, so get the animation out of the way. Those of you who've seen me present an introductory lecture might have seen these slides. This is me, age 11, trying to be, a champion middle distance athlete. On the right here, you've got Steve Cram, who was my hero, winning the World Championships 1500 meters. So I basically spent 20 years chasing an Olympic dream that I never achieved. But I tried hard and I got reasonably far, and I learned a huge amount about that. And my belief system was that, hey, exercise is good for you. So a lot of exercise is very good for you. But it's taken many years to kind of unravel that. So this is where I've lived the last 8 years until the start of 2021. This is Johannesburg, South Africa. And it's basically Gold Rush City. That's how it was founded. But it's basically the stress capital of the world from what I can see. Stress levels are, make London look very, very low stress. So people would work really, really hard. They'd be up at 4:30 in the morning to go out running or cycling. As I say, Ironman was really popular. Comrades Marathon, which is 90 kilometers, was majorly popular. Two Oceans Marathon, that's 56 kilometers. Lots of multi-stage cycling races, running races, and becoming more and more popular. Apparently around about year 2000, the average recreational activity was golf. Now the golf courses are almost paying you to come and play on their course because everyone's doing these more hectic challenges. Now, what I've seen personally working with these clients is not the picture of health depicted from tables like this. What I've seen is aging athletes. What I've seen is a lot of autoimmunity, chronic fatigue. Occasionally I see cardiovascular problems popping in. There's a triathlon coach that I know in South Africa, in Johannesburg, who in his early 40s, he started with atrial fibrillation and ended up having to have heart surgery in his 40s. And this was one of, a really fit guy who'd been doing triathlons for like 20 odd years. He's continuing, his belief system is the same as mine was. I've been woken up based on working with clients and seeing the other side of the equation. Okay, so that's kind of building into what we're going to do now. Now, just a point about general recommendations. So this is a report of the Surgeon General in 2003. the recommendations for exercise around health are actually quite modest. Mortality risk reduction appears with even small amounts of daily exercise, such as 15 minutes, which have been shown to peak within an hour of exercise. Here's ACSM again, same paper. What are they recommending in terms of quantity? So we're looking at over 30 minutes per day for 5 days plus per week for a total of over 150 minutes per week of exercise. That's not a lot. I've worked with a lot of people that do more than that every day. Or they can do vigorous intensity cardiorespiratory exercise for more than 20 minutes per day, more than 3 times a week. Okay, or a combination of this. And they've used this MET value to explain. So I've got another slide here to give you an illustration of what METs are if you're a bit hazy about that. I've chosen a moderate intensity MET table here. So if we just choose something, let's say the last one here, walking 8 kilometers an hour, that's a very, very brisk walk. So kind of power walking gives you 8 metabolic hours. So in other words, if you walk at that pace for an hour, you'll get 8 METs. So 3 hours of that per week, you'd be sitting on 24 METs. Okay. Now, this 500 to 1,000 MET minutes, this is measured in minutes, not hours. So I measured this earlier. That's equivalent to between 8 and 16 metabolic hours per week. Okay, so not a lot. We're now moving on to a really pivotal paper in my whole discussion. So this is O'Keefe and 2012, and he acknowledges these modest exercise levels needed for improved cardiovascular health. But he says in highly trained athletes, they often perform strenuous aerobic exercise for several hours daily, sometimes accumulating workloads of 200 plus metabolic hours per week. Okay, so instead of like 10 to 20, as ACSM's recommending, Surgeon General's recommending, we're going tenfold here, right? And this is not uncommon. So if you do something quite strenuous, instead of getting an 8, you'll be maybe sitting at a 12 or a 15. And it's not uncommon for people, athletes, to train 10 plus hours a week. So you multiply that up by 10 and you're suddenly tenfold the general recommendations. Okay, so just moving on to a few other measurements. This group of researchers measured MRI evaluations of 102 apparently healthy runners aged 50 to 72. So you term them masters runners who had completed at least 5 marathons in the past 3 years, showing evidence of patchy myocardial scarring in about 12% of these runners, which was a 3-fold increase incidence compared to age-matched controls. In other words, generally sedentary people in this specific measurement were more healthy than these seasoned runners. Here's another one from Circulation. So this journal came up a lot when I was looking at this. So participants who completed more than 2,000 metabolic minutes per week, which was over about 32 metabolic hours, had a higher prevalence of, I can't remember what CAC stands for, but atherosclerotic plaques. That's what my grandfather died of, than individuals who exercise less than 1,000 metabolic minutes per week, which is about 16 metabolic hours per week. Okay, so it's scary stuff when you start reading this. Here's another one. This was a massive big 25-year-old epidemiological study of 3,000 individuals, showing that Caucasian men who participated in 3 times the recommended physical activity guidelines over a 25-year period had 27% higher odds of developing coronary subclinical atherosclerosis by middle age. So it's quite scary. I mean, I was an athlete for 20 years, but let's say only 10 of those in my prime adult age. And then I kind of backed down hugely and kind of worked and brought up a family and that sort of thing. So I'm not too concerned, although there's a bit of a seed of worry in there. The people that really worry me are those who didn't retire from their track career age 30. They keep going into the masters age group 30 plus, then 40 plus, maybe even 50 plus, like that triathlon guy in Johannesburg I mentioned earlier. Okay, they do worry me a lot. The other group that worry me are the CrossFitters, the high intensity interval training vogue, let's call it. There's a lot of fashion behind this now. And at least with endurance runners, they will kind of alternate steady days and intensity days, interval sessions. Like some CrossFit, I've worked with many CrossFit athletes. Some you'd call an athlete because they compete. Others just, they think that that's going to make them fit and healthy. But they're doing 5 days a week of intense weight training based intervals. The ones who get the balance right, are okay, but many just push, and that's a problem. Okay, here's O'Keefe again. So I took a diagram out of his paper that showed a nice flow chart going from the extreme exercise efforts, such as training for a marathon, with all the increased physiological responses, which we maybe in the past thought were all good things. You've got immediate effect, putting strain on the heart and the atrioventricular dilation, also systemic system. Subacute effects can be cardiac fibrosis, but then long-term effects, we're seeing all these different things like cardiac chamber sizes increase. Now, we tend to think of that as a good thing. I remember when I emigrated from the UK to South Africa, I had to have a chest x-ray to test for tuberculosis, check if I didn't have it. And they sent me back for another one with concerns of cardiovascular risk because my heart, left ventricle was quite enlarged. And I'm like, oh, that's because I'm an endurance athlete, even though I've been retired for a good few years. But it kind of stays with you. Now I'm realizing, shit, this is maybe not as good as I thought. So long-term chronic training can throw the system out of balance. Okay, O'Keefe, he cited 15 research papers, which in terms of mechanisms, why he thought these observations were occurring. I've followed some of them up. So he noted that high intensity endurance training, such as marathon and ultra endurance, marathon or cycling, over a prolonged period of time, I should underline this, prolonged period of time, has been associated with as much as a 5-fold increase in the prevalence of atrial fibrillation. What's more, they noted that left atrial hypertrophy, which is commonplace in competitive endurance athletes, may be a predictor of atrial fibrillation. Yeah, that's just what I was talking about, the hypertrophy of the left side of the heart. Have any of you experienced atrial fibrillation? I have on 2 occasions, and it's a bit scary, where your heart just kind of starts going crazy. Atrial fibrillation is not threatening, but it can be if you leave it and you don't take care of it. I remember a client in London that every time we sort of stepped him up a notch, we would have a heart rate band on him. His heart rate would suddenly just flip double. It might be at 120 and suddenly it's at 240, meaning his atrial contractions were doubling. The nervous input was doubling. And we had to do very calming yoga and meditation to calm his system, and it would just suddenly drop in half. And going on to this. This is a book that was recommended by a South African client who also burned herself out as a triathlete. And, you know, how too much exercise can kill you. The preface is written by one of the authors, Chris Case, and he's talking about he was a very respected masters cyclist who was cycling up a long hill in Boulder, Colorado, trying for a record for the particular stage for his age group. He was 52, I think. It was an attempt for his 55-year-old age group. His heart missed a beat, he felt that, and his heart rate suddenly jumped up from 155 to 218, which he kind of looked at, slowed down, stopped his session, things were okay. But then that started increasingly happening. And he ended up having a monitor to wear by a cardiac physician. And the monitor from a distance, and he had a nurse phoning him up one night saying his heart had stopped for a few seconds. So that got him freaked out. He gave up cycling and, you know, really started working on measures to support his health through, you know, things like this book will teach you. So, yeah, scary stuff. We need to, though, contextualize this, because I've presented the good and the bad. The good is basically if you do 10 to 20 metabolic hours per week of moderate exercise, you're good for health in theory. But if you increase that tenfold, there might be some risks, and keep going for a while. So let's move on to the context of the person's life. This is a recent paper by Scott Powers et al. Now, Scott Powers wrote a textbook called Exercise Physiology in 1990. That was the year I started studying physiology. So this is 30 years after. He's had a very long, distinguished career. And in our forum group, we actually discussed this paper the other day. So the crux of the paper is this bell-shaped curve. So on the left, we have normal physiological range of exercise. On the right, we have flipping into non-normal physiological ranges. So we've got this note here, exercise limiting fatigue. That's what fatigue is there for, to let you know that, hey, the body's struggling a bit. But of course, as an athlete, you're not going to win anything by listening to the first signs of fatigue. So serious athletes spend a lot of time on this right-hand side of the curve. Now, we have the ability to heal. You know, in South Africa, we used to have the South African Association of Nutritional Therapists. And on their website, it said the body has an innate ability to heal. And I absolutely believe that. People have brought themselves back from really negative health situations. So if you train over here for periods, it's okay. And you actually need to if you want to be a good athlete and if you want to compete. But as I said before, if you keep doing that over long periods of time, that's a risk factor. One of the questions the other day was, you know, does fitness affect this bell-shaped curve? And yes, absolutely. It kind of looks like this. So if you get low fitness, you will go into this negative physiological realm at the same intensity that somebody who's moderately fit will be in comfortable physiological range. Same as if you've got high fitness, you'll be in comfortable physiological range at the same intensity as somebody who's moderately trained going over into negative physiological terrain, okay? So we need to use this bell-shaped curve according to who we are and our fitness level. So this is now, we're moving into my my looking for help. I want you guys to start contributing here. How do we move this curve to the right with no extra training? So if in an ideal situation, we work mostly on the left-hand side, some at the peak, and little bits over on the right-hand side to try and optimize our fitness, staying within a healthy realm. Okay, we can't therefore shift the curve to the right by doing more training, because that just stays on the black curve and you start going down the hill, and that's called overtraining. Okay, and this is an overtraining scenario. So you've got the top curve here. This is the supercompensation model. When you train, you get weaker. If I had to ask you to do a set of 10 squats with as much weight as you can do for 10 reps, at the end of it, you're going to be weaker. But then your body starts adapting and responding and rebuilding, and then you get stronger. So that's the basic supercompensation curve. And then if you hit the body with the next phase of training at the right time, when you're on a peak again, you get this gradual increase in the curve over time. But this is mostly what my South African clients would be doing. They wouldn't quite get back to baseline, and then they'd hit another training session. Supercompensate to a lower level, supercompensate to a lower level. So it's no longer supercompensation. We're into overtraining. So the first, I'm just helping you with the first answer. We need to recover enough, sufficiently. Okay, so going back to this question, how do we shift this curve to the right? So we've got a couple of responses already. Okay, so we've got Sil saying with intermittent training, meaning rest and well-planned training sessions. Okay, so good. We need to know our athlete. We need to know how much they can cope with. We need to have a decent idea where this pinnacle of the curve is and when they're starting to push over that. So intuitive coaches can do that by watching their athletes. Of course, we've got lots of tech nowadays, like heart rate variability is a good methodology. There's lots of different things like First Beat, we've got the Aura Ring, we've got Heart Math. We've got some free or cheap apps as well. Periodization with the recovery phases. Okay, so this is good training theory. So thanks, guys. Along with supercompensation, we'll be talking about progressive adaptation and periodizing the sessions and the training plan, the training phases. So I used to coach. I used to coach athletes, runners, cyclists, and triathletes. And I would give everyone a day off each week, or at least a very, very easy day per week to get a proper good recovery in. And then I would do kind of generally 1, 2, 3 weeks up, and then fourth week drop, 1, 2, 3, fourth week drop throughout the year, but it depended on the athlete and how well seasoned they were, and also their racing schedules. So thanks for that. So what else can we do apart from good training methodologies to push the curve to the right? And I want to hear some nutrition here. And I want to hear some lifestyle. And I want to hear some, okay, good, nutrition. Let's go deeper though. So we get nutrition, we get reduced stress, we get meditation, optimal nutrition. Okay, so what is optimum nutrition? Specifically for cardiovascular health. Good, we get sleep as well. So I want to go into more detail here. What nutrition? What do we need to do to get our athletes healthy so that at the same intensity, they're on the left-hand side or the peak of this curve, as opposed to sliding over into a negative physiological consequence. Okay, so intake of protein and carbs, right? We need to go deeper than that though. So carbs, I'll throw out another word that you need to think around, and that's mitochondria. So mitochondria need enough carbs and fats to support the throughput of the energy needs. So that's good. Protein, we need enough for recovery, recuperation, and this adaptation response. So good. Healthy fats. What are healthy fats? Tell me what they are. And why? Why do we need healthy fats? What do they do? So we want to go deeper, all right? Omega-3s, omegas, right? So, and what do omegas do? Unsaturated, right? Rachel, tell me more about MPS timing. Right, Peter, thank you. And we've got anti-inflammatory. Okay, so fats, great. Got omega-3, omega-6, got omega-9. They're all polyunsaturated fatty acids. We've got our monounsaturated fatty acids, like things like olive oil. You'll get quite a lot in coconut oil, and then you get the saturated group. So the polyunsaturated fats are well known for anti-inflammation. So absolutely good for recovery. If you get too big an inflammatory response, it will slow your recovery. And then this red line will drag out longer. And this might go deeper as well if you get too much inflammation and it takes too long to actually recover. Okay, right, so we get repair tissues. What's going to repair the tissues, Rolene? And Peter, what's the A, D, E, and K for? What do we want it for? So I want you to think about this. So these are all good advice, but why do we need these nutrients? Turmeric, good, right? So we get omega-3 and omega-6. They need to be in a good balance, ideally sort of 1-to-1, up to 1-to-4 ratio. So fish oil, good nuts and seeds, but not overdoing it. A friend of mine, Henrietta, kind of called that into question recently, and some people trying to be really healthy will eat too many nuts and seeds. So don't go crazy on them. The things like turmeric, ginger, yes, absolutely anti-inflammatory. Good repair muscles, right? So tell me more about the food matrix. What do you mean by the food matrix? There'll be some terminologies that I'm not familiar with. Peter, thanks. Looking at gut health, right? Brilliant. So gut health, I'm going to bring in mitochondria again. It's been shown that a good microbiome is connected to mitochondrial health because mitochondria are essentially bugs. You know, they originate as bacteria. So if you have a healthy balance of your bacteria, and we've discussed this on another webinar, it helps you to improve your mitochondrial health and, you know, the numbers of them. Okay, Sheila, we're talking about fasting, interval eating to ensure the digestive system is repairing and functioning well. Yeah. So the fasting thing is a fine line, because if you've got a serious, we're talking serious athletes here, either elite or serious recreational athletes. It's actually the serious recreational athletes I worry about most, because they're the ones who have to fit in work, generally family, social life, and they compromise generally sleep. Nutrition's not great because they just don't have time. So if you're doing, say, an intermittent fasting or time-restricted feeding protocol, you need to do it very, very carefully to make sure they have enough energy around the important times of the day, especially around training. And a lot of people get up really early and have a cup of coffee and go and train. But that could negatively affect the adrenals, the blood sugar balance through the day, their mood, neurotransmitter production. There's a lot of reason for feeding around exercise. Okay. Sorry, Chris. There's something strange happening on Zoom tonight because every second person's called Peter. So apologies, you're all coming, well, a lot of people are coming up as Peter. Okay, vitamins needed for proper cell repair and building. Vitamin D for immunity. Okay, cool. Omegas help reduce risk blood clots. Yeah, I mean, if I'm working with cardiovascular health in a general realm, if they're not on blood thinners, I will use omegas to try and keep their blood thinner. Or it's not reducing the thinness; it's inhibiting the thickness of the blood that could otherwise come about. Okay, 12 hours for time-restricted feeding, which is quite modest. That's fine. So you might eat your dinner at 6 o'clock and then a breakfast at 7 in the morning, and you're still within that realm. Okay, K is potassium needed for cardiovascular health. It's good. Okay. Anything else, guys? I want to go on to another slide. And let's go through this and tell me what other thoughts spring to mind when you read through this list. So firstly, their food. We had a discussion around anti-inflammatories, but I didn't hear antioxidants. I saw antioxidants, but I didn't see the discussion. So your antioxidants are really, really, really vital for supporting the mitochondrial membrane, supporting the gut membrane, supporting the blood vessels, the recovery of every tissue that has been is responding to physiological overload from that training. Their sleep, somebody mentioned sleep, so good. Again, we can go into more detail and have strategies. I have a sleep handout that I give to clients. And it's the usual thing, get off these bloody blue light things at least an hour before bed. Some people can watch TV if it's a relaxing show and have a good sleep, but definitely get off the Twitter feeds and Facebook and all that stuff. Use a Kindle that's a white light rather than the blue light. And have a wind down strategy. I really like Epsom salt baths with a chamomile tea to calm me down. And just sort of tune down to the day, sit and do a bit of journaling. Sheila, thank you. Oral biome health. So maybe you've been watching Pete Williams present. Pete's just helped put together a genetics panel on called DNA Smile. And yeah, the mouth is incredibly important, how good your dentistry is. Stress levels. So we got stress, just not why stress. So there's a very strong connection between stress and cardiovascular wellness, and that's been recognized for many years. People die of heart attacks a lot because their lives are ultimately very stressful. Apparently, the most common day for having a heart attack is a Monday morning because people are going back to work. Training, or at least hard training, is known to be a physiological stressor. So I trained with a lady called Alex Concord a number of years ago, an amazing mind. She's a psychoneuroimmunologist, doctor by training as well. And she put together complex mind, but she put together a very, very simple model of the 3 Ps of stress. And it was physical stress, physiological stress, and psychological stress. So we all think of psychological stress, but if we're training hard, we're adding a physiological stressor as well. Sorry, we're adding a physical stressor as well, but that bumps into all the physiological systems. And if you add to that, let's say you're not spending enough time getting your nutrition right, and you're eating crappy bread and causing IBS, there's a physiological imbalance. And you get some hay fever on top of that, there's another physiological imbalance. And you're not eating enough micronutrients to support your neurotransmitters, and your mood's low, there's another physiological stroke psychological stressor. So they're all very linked in together. And then environment. Goodness, you know, this is not talked about in sports nutrition, but it absolutely should be. I can very easily pick some papers, and, you know, I've presented on all this stuff in the past, showing like heavy metals affects the mitochondrial membrane. So it reduces your ability to get ATP out of the mitochondria into the muscle cells, and your ability to get ADP back into the mitochondria to recycle and make more ATP. But then toxic metals have been directly linked with cardiovascular risk. But so pesticides and PCBs and, you know, the list goes on. We need to actually take action to understand, where are we training? Is it in a toxic environment? What's in our houses? I used to run a program called 12 Steps to Wholesome Nutrition. And on one of the days, it was kind of on detox day. And I gave them 3 exercises to do. One was to clean up their diet. Actually, this was over 3 weeks. One was to clean up their cupboard under their sink, go eco-friendly with all their cleaning fluids. And one was to clean out the bathroom cabinet, especially for women who wear makeup. So makeups, moisturizers, shampoos, soaps, sun creams, all of that need to be actually reviewed for an athlete. And then their drinks. You know, are they drinking glow-in-the-dark Powerade or Energy Aid? Or are they making something from a real fruit? And then our genetics. Genetics are huge, huge, huge. Okay, so I want to just kind of ask, oh, we've got a couple more. Sheila, thank you. Molds, yeah, molds as well. That's a lot more specialized in the functional medicine kind of remit. But yeah, we should be looking at that as well. Just other things, genetics, I've got a note here from a particular paper. Although exercise induces oxidative stress in the majority of individuals, it can induce reductive stress or negligible stress in a considerable number of people. Some individuals survive multiple years of intensive training and competing physiologically unscathed, whereas others noticeably age at an accelerated rate. So I think that kind of says all, doesn't it? What else would you like to add? I think we can open to questions, can we? So that's the end of the presentation. We can just discuss a bit more during question time. We've got a reference list. So anything you want to follow up, as I say, this O'Keefe paper was really good in this area, and the Powers paper gives you that bell-shaped curve. Before we go into questions, I just wanted to mention that our new course is starting in October. So there's a link to it. And we will announce our next natural sports cookery course very shortly. Okay, and there's our contact. So as I say, I'll send all these to you tomorrow. Okay. All right. Who's going to ask me something? Or discuss, you know, I like discussing with people. I love doing tutorials and getting into discussions. So what have I said tonight, or what has somebody else said tonight that has sprung some ideas on your head, or questions? What would you like to question? How can you improve your mouth biome? Ooh, right. I have to ask Pete to come on to that one. I'm not an expert in this, but I'll give you a couple of ideas. If you have a look at the Singing Dragon publisher, there is going to be a book coming out on dental health written by a functional medicine or nutritional therapy practitioner called Rose Holmes at the end of this year. So Singing Dragon, keep an eye open for that. Also look for Pete Williams and DNA Smile for a bit more information. He does trainings as well. But mouth biome, yeah, we could be here all night, but things like root canals, they can be quite dangerous because if they're not done properly, it leaves an infection under the root canal. So you kind of need to go and find a biological dentist if you haven't already done so. Or at least somebody who is very detail oriented and cares about these things. Also, the materials being used to do fillings. Obviously, the mercury fillings, there's a heavy metal load on the body that's covered with saliva, and it's ground, it's ground every day when you're chewing food. So you're leaching heavy metals into the system. What else? The regular brushing, but not brushing too hard. You don't want to lose gums. And I'm kind of, I sit on the fence with like mouthwashes because they can be a bit harsh and clear the actual biome, clear the good bacteria. Salt, Sheila, is that for, no, that's for leg cramps. You could use salt switching for the mouth as well. And also I've seen probiotics in the US specifically designed for the mouth, for dental health. Coconut pulling. I haven't seen the research, but actually I don't think there is much research, but it's one of those old things that all the health guys talk about it. So I do it. I don't do it religiously every day. I do it maybe 3 times a week for 10 minutes, not 20 minutes. So there's enough of a reasoning that I think, yeah, it can be helpful. Okay, toothpaste without fluoride and sodium lauryl sulfates. Yes, yes, and yes. Fluoride, yeah, I mean, just focus on your dental hygiene. Fluoride is a negative toxicant to your body. So, you can ideally do without it. Can you give your own nutritional exercise approach to managing the cardiovascular damage implications? Okay, cool. So let's talk about that. If we go back to, I won't share the screen again. I'm just going to refer to it so I kind of go through it. Let's just talk about food. We'll assume they're good sleep. We'll assume good stress management. We'll assume a good coach keeping them balanced. We'll assume use of HRV or training diaries and monitoring load patterns and periodized cycles. So with food, the antioxidants are really, really important, and we can open up a kind of debate here on the antioxidant question mark, because a number of years ago, a lot of people were dosing high levels of vitamin C and vitamin E and CoQ10 around exercise. And then people are realizing that the supercompensation curve might not be as adaptive if you overdose on the antioxidants because you're not letting the body do enough. So I've talked about this in other places as well, and I can send you good papers on it as well. My take on it is, yes, don't do mega doses of single nutrients, but eat well. That's the base of the pyramid. And also I really like superfood powders that you can stick in smoothies. So rather than, let's say, go and buy a sports nutrition company's recovery product that's just basically maltodextrin and protein powder and colors and flavors and sweeteners, make your own smoothie with like a really clean organic whey or a vegan powder and some yogurt, homemade yogurt from organic cow's milk or goat's milk or kefir. That's my chosen one. Add in some superfoods, which could be like lucuma, baobab. These are high in vitamin C. Or I get a mixed red powder, which would be like berry extracts. Tomato extracts are in there as well. So these are very common now. You can just do a scoop of a mixed red powder with some berries and banana, for example. That's a really nice recovery smoothie. And it revs up your antioxidants, but not in a very specific way like vitamin C and vitamin E. It's supporting these pathways without necessarily disrupting your recovery. And the same goes for inflammation. So use anti-inflammatories in your cooking without going crazy with high dose turmeric extracts, for example. And things like high dose fish oil can be used for certain scenarios when inflammation is clinically high for some reason. Okay, if someone has a long history of intense aerobic training and competition is already experiencing cardiac symptoms, does that mean they should stop their intense exercise for good? For good is a very strong word. Like this example I gave you out of this book, he stopped racing, but he was only within age 55. The body has an innate ability to heal. So what you need to do, and I've been in this situation where I've been absolutely burnt out, and I just gave up running for 6 months, and I traded running for yoga, restorative yoga, instead of running. And I gave up a couple of the big stressors that I was trying to do at the time. Like I was trying to do up an old flat in London, and I was doing summer classes and a degree I was doing. So I kind of like cut down to minimum what I needed to do in my life, and then focus really strongly on good nutrition practices. I was taking adrenal supplements. I was doing antioxidants. I was doing anti-inflammatory supplements for a period until I felt a better balance. But I was also doing lots of meditations. But being an athlete, meditation, sitting on a cushion is not the easiest thing in the world to do. And be still and have a still mind. So don't feel like that's what you need to do. For me, I started doing walking meditations. And basically, what you do with this is as you're breathing in, you count your steps as you're walking along the road. As you're breathing out, you count the steps as you're walking. And when you start, you might only do 5 steps to an inhale, 5 steps to an exhale, but gradually just try and go with it. And then you're breathing in 6 steps to an inhale, 6 out. My record was 15. I was in Greece walking along beside the water, beside the sea, and I was in a good relaxed space. But normally 10's about the best I can achieve. So things like that, you really need to reverse the nervous system. That's something I haven't really talked about too much tonight. When we're training hard, and especially somebody who's been at it for a long time, maybe they were a full-time athlete in their 20s, but then, hey, you have to get a job eventually. And then, oh, the family comes along. Oh, the mortgage came along. Oh, the promotion came along. And the responsibilities grow. You end up spending a lot more of the day in a sympathetic or a fight and flight nervous system response than a recuperative parasympathetic. So one of your main things you want to work on is that nervous system. And for that, heart rate variability is very useful to help monitor, try things. How did that have effect? How was that? Okay, any other questions? What about athletes with congenital heart conditions? I would just say monitor the murmur. Generally, somebody with a murmur will have periodic visits to a cardiologist. You can check the heart rate. So just check you're not jumping into atrial fibrillation. Use HRV. At least get into a 10-minute per day meditation kind of thing. Because if you look at it, how many hours per day are you in a heightened nervous system state versus how many minutes are you actually able to get into a relaxed nervous system state? And often for these people who are training consistently, the types of athletes I've described, they're not even getting into a full good quality sleep because they'll generally relax to TV or an app on their phone, go to sleep, don't dive in deep enough, and then they're waking themselves up to an alarm. So yeah, you really have to do this yin-yang thing. How much time are they in yang, which is the sympathetic, hard? How much time are they in yin? And that's really a very simple perspective that, yeah, it took me a long time to kind of realize. You just can't just push all the time. Okay, any last questions before we finish off for tonight? So, okay, so let's leave it there. And apologies for the technological problems this evening, but at least we were able to share. And next month we do one per month. Next month we have Patricia Warby, who's going to do a mind-body type approach with mitochondria as a kind of mainstay. Okay, so have a lovely evening, good month, and we'll hopefully see you again next month.